Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is Stan, and I welcome you to an invitation and an introduction to a new collective of men and women who want to be Jesus broadcasters. They want to share God's wisdom and tell the Jesus story, and they want to do it well. And so they're coming together in a collective, and we are inviting you to join us. And here's the story. Greetings, friends, ladies and gentlemen, and perhaps just to a few of you who are just saying, what's this all about? Well, welcome. My name is Stan. I'm the radio man, and this is an introduction and maybe an invitation to what we call the Jesus Broadcaster Collective, where we are in the business of sharing God's wisdom and telling the Jesus story. I love radio. My mother says that I was always fascinated by radio. I don't remember the incident, but she says that when I was, 5 or 6 years of age, she had a small little radio in the kitchen, and I was continually looking at it and listening to it, and was curious about it. And I asked her questions about it. And then one day she came into the kitchen and found me up on the counter of the kitchen. And I was looking inside the radio because I wanted to find the little people who were there. I don't remember that, but my mother certainly does. However, I do remember going to Grandma's house and finding that she had this big, old, beautiful radio there, and that it had a green eye in it that helped you tune it better. And not only could you listen to a record player and radio, but it actually had what was called shortwave radio. Not just the regular radio that you could get on that little one that was in the kitchen, but you could hear a radio station in London, Moscow, all over the world. And I was fascinated by that. And so I became very, very avid about that. And even in America, I would oftentimes stay up, not just around the world. I would love to stay up and listen to those stations that were up late at night from far away, because they were what were called high power, clear channel stations. And I would love to listen oftentimes in the late night, and my mother would have to get upset with me and say, it's time to go to bed. Well, and then I became a ham radio operator, and I loved it. I went on to become a school teacher, and I did very well at that, but eventually I decided that that wasn't for me right now. And then I learned something, that sometimes you should go back to what you first love. And so what happened was, I was teaching school, but I went back and got a degree from a well-known radio school and became a radio broadcaster. I was hoping that I would be a big star. I was interrupted because one of my friends, who had become my pastor friend and counselor, said, Stan, I was on radio. I was a missionary radio operator for a number of years. I was teaching people about Jesus on the radio. Well, to make a longer story short, I became a missionary broadcaster at one of the top of the line missionary broadcast companies. Many of you may have heard of them. However, that is not what I want to talk a lot about today. Just simply to say that I have, as some would say, all kinds of radio blood inside of me, and I have all kinds of stories because I'm a broadcaster. And as my wife would say, if you're married to a broadcaster, you realize that they can talk about anything, whether they know what they're talking about or not. They love to tell stories. And she has a line from time to time that, Stan, when it comes to radio, he's just full of it. And I think the double meaning is intended. Here's where I'm at. I've been involved in broadcasting now for almost 45 years, maybe longer. Um, I started when radio was, you know, towers and transmitters, and it was wonderful. It was mystical. It was behind the microphone and knowing that there were perhaps millions of people out there listening to your voice and, playing the music and enjoying all of the things that went into it. Well, that kind of radio was wonderful. However, it's not quite the radio that we have today. And what I would like to say is that part of my mission in life now, because uh, it's not quite true, but it's close to being true. I'm probably one of the inventors, certainly one of the first people to get involved into what is called the podcasting moment. And I was fascinated by that because when I was in radio, it was a 500,000 watt radio station booming all of that power up these 700-foot towers, and it would reach out. And obviously, it went far. Today, I'm here before a microphone that probably cost me $50, $60. And I have a computer, and I have some software. And with the modern technology, I can talk to people all over the world. And my radio programs don't just go away. When I was on the air, there was maybe a 2-hour radio program. And then when I was done and the switch went off, the program was over. It was done. Well, now that same program can be around perhaps forever. Who knows? However, it is still radio. Radio is simply a wonderful creation where a guy like Tesla and Marconi and Faraday discovered that if you could get electricity to go back and forth at a rapid speed, boom, waves of radiation went into the air. And if you would put up an antenna or have something similar, that could be caught. And what was called wireless came into being. And today, of course, the major way that we listen, talk, communicate, just think what life and business would be like without radio, without electronic communication. Well, what I would like to suggest is that we need to know, as followers of Jesus, what would Jesus do if he were here today? What if he was a broadcaster? Now, I will actually be challenged by someone who was a brilliant broadcaster, who I had the chance to encounter in some ways, who worked with the BBC and was marvelously and gloriously created in a new life from his militant atheism, and became a real speaker of the truth of God's wisdom and the Jesus story, and bringing to light many of the people who had been influenced by it. But he also had a very interesting statement to those of us who he would call the religious radio pros. He said, could it be that if Jesus were here today, and we always should ask that question, what if he was in Rome, he was in Palestine, he was in Judea, Galilee, and 30, 40, 50 miles. Obviously, because of something that happened really, really bad, which you all know about, Uh, his family ran to Egypt for a few years and then came back. But uh, he's the man. Indeed, he is the man. Uh, what if that was today that happened? And what he says is, if Jesus was here today, there would probably be a fourth temptation. No, the top three. And of course, the fourth temptation would be to be on television, to be on the radio. And Malcolm Muggeridge in the book Christ and Media says, I believe he would say no to that too. Because is it possible to communicate ultimate spiritual reality in a man-made fantasy media? Is that possible? Now, I'd like to believe that with our help together, we can actually solve that problem. Maybe being Jesus broadcasters, we can do these three things. We can search both scriptures and hearts and minds and all of the experiences that we have and say, what is God's message today? What is God's wisdom? And we need to be really good at finding out and discovering and being able to talk about not theology, not denominations, not philosophy of great religions. What is God's wisdom? So that we can live well now and forever. God's wisdom. And then very simply, tell the Jesus story. And then here we go. Here's our fun little icon. There's Jesus. He's dressed nicely. I think he would. And we've got him decked out with the golden microphone and the headphones. And he would be in the business of sharing God's wisdom and telling his story. So here is what the collective is all about. It's about a group of us who are coming together. No organization, no great mystery, nothing like that. But guess what? In effect, we want to help one another. Help one another to be Jesus broadcasters. And what we're going to try and do is say, what is God's message today for the audiences that we have? And then what would be God's methods? God's a communicating God, but he communicates quite differently than most of us. What we're going to find out is something that I tell people all the time, particularly those of us who are broadcasters. I said the master teacher came into the world and he told stories and asked questions. So what do we often do? We preach sermons and give answers. I wonder if Jesus would do it differently. What would he do if he were you? And he was on the radio like you are. What would it be like? What is God's message? What are God's methods? And can we make them work using modern man's marketing media? The technology is awesome. But remember, technology is never neutral. It always tends and oftentimes is used to bend things toward the evil and toward the bad and away from the reality of God's love. Technology can be that way. And in fact, guess what? You all know that there is a ton of stuff on the media, which is not only not very good, it's bad. Some of it's evil. And a lot of it's not true. It's fake. Now, how do we, who love the microphone, like the being behind the camera, know that this is something that has great and mighty power? How do we help each other be really good at being on the radio? We're not just, as I say, it's not about being a podcaster or knowing how to do a podcast. It's not about just being a broadcaster and knowing how to do a broadcast. It is about understanding that to be a broadcaster is a whole state of mind and being. And that for us to be good at it, we must be full of the Spirit. And we must be full of the desire to, look at that and say, yeah, that's what I want to be. I'd like to be a really good Jesus broadcaster. Well, we're going to try and help each other do that. It's not about Christian radio. It's not about radio as we know it. There's all kinds of ways that we can use these radiated means. It's not just transmitters and it's not just radios. I don't even know if anybody has a radio itself anymore. And how can we use man's modern media, which is mostly fake and fantasy, but still bend it into the kingdom of God in such a way that in that noise and in those messy things that are out there, somehow the power of God's wisdom and the power of the Jesus story and the power of the very Spirit of Jesus himself will break through and grab the microphone, grab the camera, and make it real and good and life-saving and life-changing, so that we can not only live better now, we can live better forever. Are you interested? I'd love to hear from you. It's a collective. It's not an organization. It's not a membership. It's a collection of people who will come together to help one another be really good. Make Jesus smile. I want him to say, when he sees our radio program or experiences our radio and video program, he says, yeah, that's how I would have done it. Yeah, that's good. Do it again. Encore. Encore. That's what I'm hoping, that we're going to fill the world in all of the languages of the world with people who are Jesus broadcasters. If you're interested, please reach out to me. This is part of what I do called What It Takes Radio. Stan, S-T-A-N, at witradio.net. What it takes. We're in the job of business of helping you do and know what it takes to be really good at being on the radio. Stan at witradio.net. Stan at witradio.net. We're on the go. We're on the air. And we'd like to work together with you. All the best and blessings. We're going to make this happen. And we would love to have you be part of the happening. Till next time, best and blessings. Bye for now.